Believe it or not, rushing around is part of Pastor Stephen's and my life. We've been here early lately, but as you know, we're usually rushing in at the last minute. About, I don't know, 25 years ago, maybe when Hillary was little, we were rushing around one day doing our errands, and there's a drugstore right off a main drag in West Hartford where we were living at the time. And you really had to kind of peel off the road to get in there before someone tried to hit the back of your car. So we went rushing off this road into this drugstore parking lot, and I saw a figure out of the corner of my eye on the sidewalk near some signs, but left it at that. I didn't think about it much. Ran in to do our errands, grabbed this, ran down this aisle. Very action-packed time at the drugstore. But this entire time, there was this gnawing thought in the back of my mind that I knew this figure that I had seen out of the corner of my eye. It was kind of gnawing at me. So when we came back out of the grocery store, we talked a bit, and it dawned on us that we did know this person. He was standing alone. We walked over to him, and lo and behold, it was one of my classmates from elementary school, who I'd also gone to Sunday school with, and actually his dad was my Sunday school teacher for years. He looked terrible. He had gained a lot of weight, not that that's a problem, but this was a thin person all his life. He looked disheveled, he hadn't shaved, not dressing very well, couldn't figure out what was happening with him, and we didn't want to ask a lot of questions. We just went up and had a nice chat. I just said, it's great to see you. I'm not going to say his name out loud, but it's great to see you. I'll say John. We say John for everything. How are you? He told us little bits and pieces. We just had a very nice, casual conversation for maybe, 10 minutes. Years went by. We saw him probably, 5 or 7 years later at our old church. Looked completely different. He was well groomed, he was wearing a suit, ran over and grabbed his wife, who he had not had at that time. Really anxious to have us meet his wife. She was pregnant, introduced us to his first child, really happy. And he pulled us aside at a quiet moment during the coffee hour and explained, you talked to me at a really rough time. For years, and this is a tough story, so I'll try not to get upset, but for years he'd been very jealous of his older brother, all the way through school. Kind of secretly wishing bad thoughts for him, and his brother got a brain tumor and died. And for about a decade, this thought was growing inside of him that he'd somehow caused this. And it had caused him to alienate himself. He physically separated himself out from his family and friends because he just didn't think he deserved that love anymore. And what had happened was he got his wish. No one was around him. No one really saw him anymore. No one listened to him. No one wanted to speak to him. He'd created an island for himself, and he regretted it. Now, I doubt that we were the first or only people that finally recognized him and walked up and said hello. But at the end of his story, he said, I want to thank you for your kindness, for taking time out to come and say hello to me, because not a lot of people were doing that anymore. And that has kind of stayed with me for a long time, because this was a guy who had it all, threw it away because he felt horrible about something that he actually hadn't even done. But he just didn't think he deserved love anymore. And then there he was, back at his old church where we went to Sunday school together. It was pretty awesome. And you could tell that he was not actually the same person. He had changed. Because of his time, his self-exile on the street, he learned compassion and mercy and not judgment and love in a way that a lot of those around him didn't know. And he was shining that light, I gotta tell you. He was letting that knowledge of this love and this peace out in a new way because he got it. He understood what it was like to feel alone and invisible in his self-exile. He had traveled to the far side of humanity, went from insider to outsider, and now he knew what that felt like. And the reason I'm telling you this story isn't that, and the title of the sermon is Entertaining Angels. I'm not saying we were angels or he was an angel, but it's an example of someone not being recognized, or you not recognizing someone else, someone that you actually know. And around us, this happens all the time. I'm not talking about being busy about buying your groceries and not noticing someone walking by. I'm talking about really seriously realizing as you walk around that you kind of might know someone, but you're just going to let that slip. I'm not going to recognize that person. So around us are these people. And I'm going to challenge a common thought. When we think about someone being on the outside, we often think of them as not being normal. And I'm going to say, what is normal? I'll tell you. In shoemaking, we realize that everyone just makes shoes for the target center number of people, and all the outside sizes aren't taken care of. And that's normal. That's what normal is for our society. The most people that can come together in the middle that are the same, we call normal, and everyone else we just disregard as not being normal. Well, that's just something we made up. You know, we're all the same, like we were talking together today in the children's time. We're all brothers and sisters. Let go of those definitions. They really mean nothing. It's just some convenient thing we came up with for maybe just consumerism, I don't know. But it's not a real thing. So as we go forward, I'm going to be challenging people to let go of that, because I have to tell you, we all experience what my friend John experienced to some degree or another at some point in our life. Somewhere along the line, we feel invisible or outside or unloved or unlovable. We put ourselves away in a category because we don't think we deserve to be loved, or we don't feel that we're normal anymore. We get lost, and Jesus uses the analogies of storms all the time, so I'm just going to do it too. We launch out our ship into this bay, into this harbor of safety, and we feel good, and then these storms come along and they shred our sails, or they tip over our boat, or something horrific happens to set us off course, and we just get lost. And we can't find our way back. And what Jesus is trying to say when he talks about storms is there's someone with you on that boat. There's someone with you, and we can't see him. Now I'm really going to challenge you, and this really doesn't say how old I am, but it tells you about the way I was raised. Does anyone remember the movie The Bishop's Wife? Yeah, Lori. All right, yeah, of course. Of course it is. So Cary Grant, who was the only guy that could ever show up at our house to steal my mom away, and that never happened. David Niven, Loretta Young, fantastic actors. I love this movie. It's about this angel, Dudley, great name, who comes down because David Niven prays to God for help because he needs to raise funds to fix their cathedral, okay? So he's praying for help, so of course it's not going to turn out like that. So Dudley comes down, and only David Niven, who's the bishop, can see him. Like a lot of Hollywood movies, there's an invisible character, and everyone thinks that the other person's crazy because no one else can see him. But Dudley has a scheme, and it's God's scheme, of course, and that is, and I'll make it short, and you'll have to go watch the movie, that, yes, he's going to help David Niven collect all the money and get on the good side of the rich people, but guess what? It's not going to go towards building the cathedral. So you'll have to watch the movie to figure that out. You can kind of guess what's going to happen next, but it all turns out really lovely, and they learn some lessons along the way. Number one, God does hear your prayers. Number two, it's probably not going to be the answer you're looking for. And number three, remember why you're a Christian. So, we're Christians because we understand it, and we know we're supposed to be helping these people who need our help. I could talk about that movie all day. It is great, right, Lori? You have to watch it. And yes, Cary Grant does a little bit of the Cary Grant stuff, but you can just, go with that. And you have to think, wouldn't it be great if angels just showed up that way? And I don't care if I'm the only one that can see them. But it would be really nice if you could pray and say, I met an angel. Marilyn used to say that she saw angels. But most angels, I think, are unseen, and we actually had an experience like this. Long time ago, we had a friend drop off a piece of really heavy equipment at our house when my shoe shop was up there, and it was really heavy. And he brought it on a tow truck. And we were trying to unload this really heavy piece of machinery. It took a whole bunch of us. And he had blocks on the tow truck tires so that it wouldn't move while we were doing this. It was a lot of struggle, and finally, at long last, we got this ginormous, heavy piece of machinery off the tow truck, and then the tow truck took off and started heading down a hill, right towards the 2 propane gas tanks at my house, right next to where my girls were. And we all started screaming. It was funny, because we were so scared that you couldn't hear anything, and then all of a sudden you realized that there was this loud screaming noise and it was yourself. We were all screaming, watching this go there, and you're thinking, please God, stop this tow truck. And it did. The tow truck stopped, really for no reason, because the blocks that were under its tires were long gone. That was a moment where there were unseen angels. And we were entertaining them and bringing them there with our prayers. That was an exciting day that I'm glad is over. Now, a lot of people pray for angels, and maybe you've seen some of them, but I will also tell you that I saw another type of angel, and this one really surprised me. It's a small story, but it's very apropos about the topic today. In Brattleboro, there's a lot of people begging. And I've gotten kind of tired of explaining to everyone where all the free meals are, where the social services are to go get help. I have a whole spiel because I want them to be taken care of. I want them to have a safe place and food, and I'm hoping they'll get into services if they need that. So one day I was a little impatient with this one fellow, and I explained all this to him, and he said, I have all of those, but I don't have money to buy gifts for my child. And I said, well, I don't think that that's a normal thing, but there's places to get gifts for your child for Christmas, and I can tell you where they are. And he goes, no, she's in Connecticut. I have to send money to her mom. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I don't give out cash, but I'll help you get the things that you need. He was very frustrated and kind of mad at me because I wouldn't just give him money to go buy a present, but I had to draw a line somewhere. 2 days later, this fellow, and no one had ever challenged me like that. I was walking down the street, meeting Stephen at a car, and I just made a bunch of copies. I had all these important papers in my hand, and they blew away. The papers blew away, and this person leapt off the sidewalk and ran out into the middle of the busy street and started picking up these papers before they get run over by a car. Turned around, I'd run up the street to pick up the papers too, and he handed them to me, and it was this guy. Without a thought, put himself in danger to pick up my papers and hand them back to me. And I said, you are an angel. And I've called him that ever since. And actually later that day, Stephen has these little pocket angels. We tracked him down and gave him a pocket angel, and he's kept it with them ever since, I think. But that was a really instructive moment for me. And I think that really changed his perspective of a lot of things too. He actually moved out into a boarding house, and he's been actively looking for jobs. Not that that has anything to do with me, but every little bit helps to get confidence back. So that was pretty exciting. And all of these things together, the idea of entertaining angels, no matter where they came from, sometimes it's you, sometimes you have to be an angel to yourself, sometimes the angel is a stranger, or it's unseen, or someone you know, all boils down to one thing, because we don't always know who's going to help us or how we can help. And it's the royal law that we heard today in the scripture. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. If we did that all the time, we wouldn't have to worry about being helped, or who we're helping, or what this person's doing, or thinking about how they're dressed, or if they're talking to themselves on the corner. Any of these issues are taken care of as we remember this one thing: love your neighbor as yourself. Now, the most dangerous place to be when we're thinking these thoughts is sitting in church. Yeah. And that's because inside we feel safe. We're comfortable here, right? We've got Terri sitting back by the door to make sure everyone's okay. We're all aware of who each other is. We all know each other pretty well. When someone new comes in, we welcome them. Hi, Joyce and Keith. It's a family. When you step out of these doors, it's a little scarier. And I have one more story for you before I wrap it up. A lot of stories today. Not all churches are so welcoming. I went to a church with Gabby, and first of all, I was the only one there that was wearing pants. That kind of set the stage for this. I was dropping her off to go to a sleepover, and we had asked her to go because it was a youth group and we really wanted to try it out. She did not want to go. I talked her into this, dropped her off, and then I decided to mingle with the parents to say hi. Not a single parent talked to me. I sat down at a table with other parents, tried to engage them over coffee and a muffin. Not a single parent talked to me. Finally, I went up and found out who was in charge, introduced myself, and said, I'm dropping my daughter off. It would be really nice if some of the kids could make her feel welcome, because no one had talked to Gabby yet either. So I convinced her to stay through the night. She'll never let me forget it. Picked her up the next morning, and she said, I'm not doing that again. That was the most unwelcoming church that I have ever been to. And there was no reason for that. You know, we were coming from another church. We looked like normal people, I think. And yet they just couldn't stick that hand out. They couldn't say, hello, God's peace to you. So I shook the sand off my feet and kept going. We're all supposed to be treating people like Jesus did. No matter what they look like, where they come from, how they speak, how they dress, the color of their skin, wherever. If we can't understand them because they have an accent, slow down and take your time. If we don't want to hear their story, you know what? You're going to have to hear their story. We have to slow down. We have to pay attention. We have to meet people. The most important thing in faith, we heard this yesterday, is building relationship. It's all about relationship. It's about loving ourselves, our neighbors, and loving our God. We're called to treat people like Jesus did in the story today with the woman from Syria, Phoenicia. She was not Jewish, she was a Gentile. She was an unchaperoned woman. She was unclean. He didn't have to talk to her. He was Jewish, but he did. And she argued with him and won. He stopped and he listened. For judgment without mercy to anyone who has shown no mercy, but mercy triumphs over judgment. That's the part we need to remember. When you go out this week, today, out into the world, keep mercy in your heart. Recognize the unrecognizable. Let the invisible person show up for you. Look for angels and try to be an angel yourself when someone's in need. Amen.